Speculate what our ancestors would have eaten, but in some cases we do have solid evidence of their Stone Age diet. My journey now takes me to the Scottish island of Colonsay, once covered in hazel woods, but now a barren and windswept island. And it is here that one of the most exciting archaeological discoveries of recent times has been made, one which sheds light on the hunter-gatherer diet. The work here is led by Professor Steve Mythen from the University of Reading.
Steve, what have you uncovered here?
Well, we're sitting at a Mesolithic camping site that dates to about 8,500 years ago. And the key feature is a large pit, about 4.5 metres in diameter, that I think was the base of a hut originally, and that was later used as a waste dump, because it's packed full with decayed midden material. That's rubbish plant material. Bits of stone tools are thrown away, and what survives now is this thick black deposit. Within that there's a fantastic quantity of plant remains. The key ones are pieces of charred hazelnut shell. These are what we dug up several years ago, and if you look, these are tiny pieces of fragmented, charred shells of hazelnuts.
You can see it quite clearly, can't you? These striations.
Yeah, that's right. You can see they're definitely hazelnut shells.
Yeah, definitely.
And there were literally hundreds of thousands of fragments like that. Clearly the hazelnuts had been roasted at some time. My guess is that the charred ones are the ones that got burnt in the roasting pit, and they're probably chucking those charred ones away.
And why do you think they were roasting the hazelnuts?
Well, they may have been roasting them just to make them more palatable to eat. I mean, if you are eating quite a lot, they're rather better for you. It could be of roasting them as a means for storing them, because I think once they're roasted, they can store for several weeks, if not months. So they may well have been just particularly productive hazel woodland on this island, and putting a lot of energies into roasting large quantities and taking them off the island and using them over the next few months.
It's very unusual, isn't it, to find this sort of remain from that period?
Yeah, in quantity. Bits of charred hazelnuts are found on many sites, but normally tens or hundreds of fragments. But to find hundreds of thousands of fragments is really quite astonishing.
Besides hazel shells, the team have come across other Mesolithic finds. They're using a technique called geophysics, in which they're able to detect by computer where the magnetic property of the ground changes.
So Karen, we got some additional geophysics to the area to the south down there. For example, there's a quite nice dark anomaly which is at...
This suggests some disturbance and therefore pinpoints where to dig.
And 21.7
in diameter.
One of the team, Sam, has come across some items today which really interest me.
So this is what you found so far, Sam?
Yeah, these have just come out of this layer just in here. We've got a sort of selection of sort of flint chips and things.
Well, there are two things obviously shout at me straight off. Obviously there's that little tiny blade. I mean, that's beautiful, isn't it?
That's a lovely piece. That's very sort of diagnostic of the Mesolithic as well.
Yeah, you can see very clearly where that's been worked by people. These lovely scars from former blades from the core, and then this one has been struck off.
And then a little bit of nibbly retouch on the end.
On the very tip.
Yeah.
I mean, you could use that as it is, as a tip for an arrow or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's very good.
It's a lovely
The other
piece.
one that shouted at me was that, because that's exactly what I make if I'm making an arrow. I take a shard and I just strike through to make this curve, because that for scraping an arrow shaft, you got the perfect angle, and it looks like some use, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's got these little nibbly scars, which might have been deliberately made, but my bet would be on them just being the result of using.
And I think that this would have been worked, what, 7,000 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And we're the first people to touch that.
That is neat, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is exciting.
You like to think, well, maybe someone dropped that and spent a while looking for it and then gave up, and 7,000 years later, there we are.
What do you think about the people who are able to come here? Because, I mean, it's quite a crossing, even a modern ferry, isn't it?
It is just amazing. They would have been using either coracles or dugout canoes, and most likely moving fairly regularly, I think, between the islands. And having that knowledge of the currents and the crossing places and the coast, and had been totally at home in this seascape rather than landscape, because I think often they'd have been seeing the land from the sea rather than on the land as we do.
Considering just how many charred hazel shells were found on Colonsay, it does seem quite likely that hazels were a staple food of ancient Britons at a time before farming and grain. Seeing first-hand evidence that builds a picture of the lifestyle of our hunter-gatherer ancestors has really inspired me. Back in the hazel woods of the south, Gordon and I now want to experiment with the technique of roasting hazels using a shallow pit which was used at that time.
So I'm now going to line that with sand. And it's believed that sand was even brought in to some of the sites. So it played an important part in the process of the cooking. Of course, sand will get hot very quickly and holds the heat better than the soil. Got a few with weevils.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. So now we seal these with an airtight layer of sand on top. That's it. And now we build a fire on top of there, and we're going to small stick fire because we want lots of heat and the fire doesn't burn for very long. So. I always envision them going up to high places and looking out for the smoke from the campfires of their cousins.
That's right.
Right, well I'm going to start to open this now. The sand's very hot, and although it's only been a quick cooking, that's all we want. The nuts should have changed colour slightly. You can see the heat coming out. They look a little scorched. They're easily burned. Very hot. Today when we crack nuts we have nut crackers and we crack them on the side and often break the nut. But we know from the archaeological record that the way our ancestors cracked them, which was like this. The flat end was put on a surface and then the other end was struck with a stone. And that cracks it very easily and doesn't break the nut inside. Perfect. Tastes like potato. Really nice cooked. They're much better than uncooked.
Very good. It's of course much more digestible, especially for children.
Oh yeah.
They always say that children shouldn't eat too great a quantity of the fresh ones. I think this overcomes that problem entirely.
It's incredible. That's a flavour from the past. It's beautiful. It's so improved. I find it incredible to think that this was probably one of the most widespread practices in terms of food at this time of year, 6,000 years ago or beyond, who knows how long ago. And that because we've managed to find just one or two fireplaces where this happened, we can piece this back together and breathe life into this ancient meal.
But the forest wasn't just a source for staple food. It offered a huge variety of diverse resources, which provided vitamins and antioxidants as well as carbohydrate and protein.
Whenever you're walking through a forest, you have to keep your eyes very sharply focused on the leaves of the trees about you, because that way you can come across a few surprises. And this is a case in point. This isn't a common tree in Britain by any means, but it is to be found in our woods. This is the wild service tree, and I've always thought of this as the woodsman's tree because most people walk right past it and never even recognise it. And there you see the leaf. It looks like a flame, and by the end of the autumn these are usually red.